We love some tea, even if we little dogs. Let me one aside. But basically, I'm going to give you guys a wee little talk. But before I begin, in all seriousness, I do want to say thank you. It's been so inspiring to be here, to hear from Dr. Trojanov, to do ward rounds with Dr. Watson, hear about the work that you guys are doing. So you've already shared so much with me, and I want to share something back with you. So my hope is that you'll be able to find it helpful and encouraging. Let's get started. Today, I want to share with you ideas from my PhD called Palliating Uncertainty. In this perspective, uncertainty isn't just something to fix with more knowledge and technology, but something to palliate, to alleviate the suffering of and live with. I'm going to start by playing a video from the university where I did my pre-medical studies. And it illustrates pretty well some of the ways that we deal with uncertainty in medicine.
People want cures, an end to every disease. And so we explore, we look further, we advance and iterate and wrestle the unknown until something new emerges. People want hope. So we train and teach and question, empowering generations of the inquisitive, the caring, and the courageous. People want certainty. So we collaborate and innovate and boldly fight for them and with them, using every tool and technology within our reach. People want to come to one place and know they can find an answer. That's what they want. Cures, hope, certainty. They want Michigan answers.
The message of Michigan Answers is that uncertainty is something to fight. And something must be wrong if uncertainty surrounds you. Knowledge and science and technology will save us from uncertainty, and we can promise answers and guarantee. We have a lot of myths in medicine, and one of them is about science, that science gives us certainty. But what is the actual experience? Patients with life-defining illnesses turn to doctors and medicine looking for answers, and instead find a messy and tangled world of conflicting voices, unknown causes, and indeterminate futures. Medicine's uncertain for doctors, too. Dr. David Eddy writes, "Uncertainty creeps into medical practice through every pore. Whether a physician is finding a disease, making a diagnosis, selecting a procedure, observing outcomes, assessing probabilities, assigning preferences, or putting it all together, is walking on very slippery terrain. It is difficult for non-physicians and for many physicians to appreciate how complex these tasks are, how poorly we understand them, and how easy it is for honest people to come to different conclusions." We spend a lot of time in end-of-life care talking about doses of opiates and pregabalins and how to help people find meaning at the end of life, but we don't talk about uncertainty, and especially the ways we deal with it. And actually, studies show that uncertainty is dealt with rather poorly through over-treatment, over-investigation, and over-medicalization. Palliative care is a specialty of alleviating suffering, and much suffering is caused by uncertainty, and especially the ways that we deal with it. I'll let you read this quote by William James. You may have felt this way before. All right, I'm going to ask you guys to participate in an exercise. So I want you to stand up if you can resonate with any one of these experiences. Oh, don't stand up yet, sorry. Stand up. So please stand up. Stand up if you've ever been uncertain about how to apply guidelines to a patient in front of you. You guys aren't all allowed to stand yet. I've got my questions. Okay, stand up if you've ever read conflicting studies or gotten conflicting advice and just didn't know who to believe. If you're already standing, you can raise your hand if you want. Stand up if you've ever been unsure if a treatment is making a patient's life better or worse. If you've ever been unsure about a patient or family's motivation or agenda. If witnessing a patient's story has made you ask questions about your own life and meaning. And if you've ever seen anything in your practice, some people might even call miraculous. So here's my point. Basically, everyone is standing. And uncertainty is part of our job. If you feel uncertain as you practice medicine, it might just mean that you're normal. So credit to the done. So that being said, we go about our day not too fussed about all this uncertainty. We follow the algorithms and the protocols. We can be unsure about the diagnosis, but still pretty clear about the plan. And I think there's something about acting that palliates uncertainty. Those in palliative care might already know this, but the Latin root of the word palliate, it means to cloak. And to cloak can mean to hide and cover, like a scary image. But to cloak also can be to enfold, and hold, and wrap around, the way that a warm blanket can cloak and comfort. And I think there's something about acting that can palliate uncertainty in both senses of cloaking. So I don't have Michigan answers for you today. I'm sorry to disappoint. I'm actually from Michigan, but I am here to speak about a philosophy of uncertainty, and it's by William James. He was the father of modern psychology and father of a philosophy called American pragmatism. In my PhD, I study his pragmatism and what it can teach us about uncertainty, how we can better deal with it, how we can help our patients deal with it, how we can learn to live with it and even accept it. James' philosophy is pretty much the opposite of Michigan answers. He says certainty cannot be promised, as life itself is a risk of faith. In his words, it's built on a slope of maybes. And knowledge isn't always the solution to uncertainty, but sometimes action and faith. And uncertainty isn't even always something to fight, but can sometimes be part of what makes life meaningful as we live into life's mystery. So James wrote the first textbook on psychology. It's a huge book, Principles of Psychology. A big idea in this book is that of attention. When our attention is on one aspect of an experience, it can blind us to other things. And in some ways, this is terrifying because no matter what we're looking at, there's always an uncertain fringe and a more that escapes our grasp. But in some ways, this is also a source of hope because when we don't know what to do, just shifting our attention can open up new possibilities. If I had to summarize James' pragmatism in a single sentence, I would call it a turn in attention. Over and over in his philosophy, he responds to uncertainty by turning attention from the uncertainty into action, towards what we can actually do. This pragmatism is a philosophy for those who find themselves thrust right into the thick of things, about to act and make decisions before all the evidence is in, and without the guarantee that they'll be right. As physicians, we've all been there. So often we wish we could have clear evidence and certainty before we act, but we just don't have that luxury. James challenges the idea that we have to have certainty and evidence before action, and suggests sometimes it actually works the other way around. Let me give an example. Do you guys know Google Maps? Yeah. Sometimes the arrow is this really annoying thing where the arrow starts spinning and you don't know what direction you're facing, let alone what direction to go. And if you just stood there waiting to know for certain what direction to go before you took a step, you'd never move. The only way to fix the arrow is to just start walking. And you might not walk the right direction, but at least you'll realize you went the wrong way and you can turn around. So James' pragmatism is like this. Sometimes we have to begin to act before we can even begin to know. I love rock climbing. I'm going to illustrate this idea of turning attention with an image that James uses, and it's that of a rock climber. So our climber friend, this is not me, our climber friend, he's put herself in a terrible position. She's stuck on a ledge, and the only way out is by a terrible leap. She could focus all her attention on the uncertainty, the fact that she might not make the jump, the doubt in her ability. And then, in James' words, at last, in a moment all unstrung and trembling, launch yourself in a moment of despair and fall into the abyss. It's a little dramatic. She could also focus her attention on the leap. Think about the things she has to do to make the leap, steadying her feet and committing to the jump. And she leaps without the guarantee that she'll make it or that it will turn out as she hopes. James would say that this leap is something that we're doing all of the time. It's just that there's some situations in life where we're forced to face it. This is a quote from an essay he has on religion, and it's called The Will to Believe. He says, "In all important transactions in life, we have to take a leap in the dark. We stand on a mountain pass in the midst of whirling snow and blinding mist, through which we glimpse now and then of paths which may be deceptive. If we stand still, we shall be frozen to death. If we take the wrong road, we shall be dashed to pieces. We do not know certainly whether there is any right one. What must we do? Be strong and of good courage. Act for the best, hope for the best, and take what comes. If death ends all, we cannot meet death better." A friend came to me recently because his father was dying from cancer, and he didn't know how long his father had left to live. Days, weeks, months. So we sat together and I listened for a while. And then what we talked about was the tasks of dying. Dying is important work, and there's important things to do. Things like saying, "I love you," "I'm sorry," "I forgive you," and "thank you," and "goodbye." In the uncertainties of prognosis, I helped my friend find his tasks. And I think this pragmatic attitude can be so helpful for our patients and for ourselves, because it substitutes teasing apart the cloud and the unknown with something we can actually do and make a meaningful difference in. Questions like, "How long do I have, doctor?" are really difficult to answer. And sometimes as physicians, we can feel pressure to be right. But I think sometimes being right is always the most important thing. We can help a patient do whatever they need to do with whatever amount of time they have left, and help do what we can do to help them live comfortably now. We can focus on the unknown point that's like this big, or the whole difference that can be made in the journey that's this big. Let's change the view of our mountain climber for a second. So she's on the edge, and she looks out over multiple horizons. There's a beautiful quote by Sir William Osler, who's the father of modern medicine. It's actually advice that he gave to his medical students. And he says, "Our task is not to see what lies dimly at a distance, but to do what lies clearly at hand." He pulls in the horizon from focusing on the unknown future to what we can do now to create that future and walk the journey well. With permission, I'm going to share a letter from a friend. They work at Palliative care. They write, "A patient that I've traveled with for a long time died, and she's been a very special friend. She and her husband have traveled through our service, through our relationships, and across their team. And she died where she wanted to die, in her own bed, with the sun streaming in and her pain eased. This friend had a sarcoma that invaded her neck, and the system was all up for wrapping her with collars and things to prevent her from having spinal cord damage, lung rolling and the like. But she wanted to process things in a different way. We talked about managing the uncertainty and certainties of each day, rather in the paralyzing, uncertain certainty of when death would be coming. She and her husband went home from our unit, and she traveled and lived for more than 2 months in the knowledge and volume of each day. 10 days ago, she was at the seaside with her beloved husband, and then the next day she started to deteriorate, and her wish was to be as sentient as possible for as long as possible, while managing pain was a guiding star for us." This woman pulled in the horizon from the uncertainty of when death is coming to the uncertainty and certainties of each day. to managing pain as a guiding star, and then the value of each day with their husband. It can be so helpful for our patients at end of life to think about their values and goals and whether our treatments are helping or hindering those. But sometimes the uncertainty is about whether or not a patient will even be well enough to complete those goals. But why go to the seaside if I might be too sick tomorrow to enjoy it? Why make those plans, try to write that book, record that album, or even reconcile that relationship if I could die before I finish it? Pragmatism involves a willingness to act without regard for the fruit of our labor. It can be summarized in a quote by Martin Luther, who says, "Even if I knew that tomorrow this world would go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree." Pragmatism is life lived on a maybe. And James would say this condition of the terminally ill, in which life is lived on a maybe, is actually the condition of us all. So a friend of mine who works in palliative care wanted me to pose this challenge to you. She said, "Lucky are those who come to the end of their life and have a community that surrounds them. And lucky are those whose life has not damaged them so much that they're still able to accept the care that's offered to them." It can be difficult to care for rude and ungrateful patients, and palliative care physicians struggle when it doesn't look like someone's dying a good death. And it's wonderful that it can be neat and there's peace and acceptance. But here's the interesting bit. What skills do you hold as a palliative care professional when things aren't so neat? And this is part of the uncertainty, because like our patients, we too act without guarantee. Our task is not to see what lies dimly at a distance, but to do what lies clearly at hand. We too can pull in the horizon. I might not know what will be a month from now, but I do know what I'm supposed to do today. And if I don't know even that, I do know what I'm supposed to do in this conversation. Namely, be with the person in their suffering, even in the suffering of uncertainty. Just naming an emotion and sitting with someone in it without trying to fix it. One of my psychiatrist friends calls that the therapeutic gift. You know, sometimes in palliative care, the task at hand is paradoxically not to focus on the doing at all. I used to work with a palliative care physician who was in the military. And he said, in the military, the motto is, don't just stand there, do something. But in palliative care, it's don't just do something, just stand there. Be present with the patient and their family. And I love this quote, but I think I actually disagree with it. I think being present with our patients is doing something. And I think it's doing one of the most important things we can do for our patients at end of life. This promise of non-abandonment is the ultimate turn to action in uncertainty. So earlier I played Machine Answers. I used to live right next door to that hospital. I actually used to take my roommate to that hospital for chemotherapy. When I was in college, my good friend and college roommate was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And so she remained living with me to be near the hospital where she was getting her treatments, and I was one of her caregivers at end of life. And I remember I was shadowing a hospice physician at the time, and I asked him, how are you just not sad all of the time? He told me something I never forget. He said, Ariel, these people would be dying regardless if I was there. And it's my blessing to be able to walk alongside her. So this perspective changed everything for me. When I saw my roommate suffering, I thought there was nothing that I could do. But then I realized there was. As she had her seizures, I could hold her hand and stand here. And even though I couldn't change the outcome, I could make even though I couldn't change the outcome, I could make a difference in an important way. And it was experiences like this that inspired me to want to do palliative care. I found life in being alongside those who are dying. Okay, what's that? So this is something I loved so much in James' philosophy, is that relationships are central to his pragmatism. One thing we know from palliative care is that relationships themselves are part of the healing. And yes, uncertainty can cause tremendous suffering, especially when uncertainty and unrealistic expectations causes distrust. But in the face of the incurable and unanswerable, as we step into the uncertainty with our patients, the uncertainty actually becomes an opportunity for relationship and healing and connection. Uncertainty can be part of the suffering, but it can also be part of the healing too. Earlier I played Michigan Answers. I have another video for you. This one is from a Milford Care Centre in Ireland. Some people may know it, but it shows an answer to uncertainty that's quite different than Michigan's answer. So, Building United shows clearly that we're not just individuals bravely acting in uncertainty alone, but we're held in community. We hold uncertainty together. And that's the real reason why I had all of you guys stand up earlier. I'm going to share something personal. So, when I was in my 20s, I suffered a traumatic brain injury, and I was given a terrible diagnosis at the time. I was told that I was either going to continue to deteriorate, losing my cognitive and physical abilities, or suddenly die and expectedly at any moment. And I remember as I grieved and prayed, I realized something. I realized that everyone who lives long enough will lose their cognitive and physical abilities. And everybody dies, and no one knows when that will be. I realized I wasn't different from anybody else. And I didn't want to live like I was dying. I wanted to live like I was living. And so, in the uncertainties of each day, I clung to a meditation from the Book of Common Prayer. And it says, "Today is another day, O Lord, and I know not what it will bring forth, but make me ready for whatever it may be. If I'm to stand, help me to stand bravely. If I'm to sit, help me to sit quietly. If I'm to lie low, help me to lie patiently. And if I am to do nothing, let me do nothing gallantly." In this time, my priest came to anoint me, and he told me, "Ariel, God is sovereign." And so I turned my attention from the uncertainty to action. All I could do was trust God. And this is what I held on to as I was held by a community that came around me. My mother, my family, my friends, my school, church, physicians, healthcare workers, other patients. They became like a cloak of comfort around me. And even though they couldn't take away the uncertainty, their presence palliated it more than the chasing of probabilities ever could. So, palliating uncertainty. How am I meant to use this in practice? In medicine, we have our biomedical interventions that are focused on the uncertainty. We've got our psychosocial, spiritual interventions that are focused on alleviating the suffering of uncertainty. And then ultimately, there's the non-abandonment of being with our patient. In medicine, our default is to focus on the uncertainty, target the biomedical interventions, and treat everything else as a consolation prize when we don't have anything biomedical to offer. But actually, alleviating the suffering of uncertainty and being with our patients is something we should be doing all the time. What I want to do is, I want to expand what it means to act. So often we think that to act means do something biomedical, but to act can be to alleviate suffering, and to act can be to be with. Let me give you an example. Let's say your patient has pancreatic cancer. We can order the CA19 markers, and we can monitor the progression with CT imaging. But this doesn't alleviate the suffering of uncertainty. Even just waiting for test results can be excruciating. And so there's other things we can do. We can help a person draw on their religion and spirituality to cope. We can involve patients' family and communities in their care. We can give them skills for managing the anxieties. We can even allow for uncertainty and providing hope. And then there's the being with our patient. Practically, this involves listening, the presence that Artie spoke about. It's something like, I've seen this before. Sometimes this happens, sometimes this. We have plans in place for each, and no matter what happens, I and my team will be with you through this. But at the end of the day, our biomedical interventions actually are ways of alleviating the suffering of uncertainty. And both of these things are ways of being with our patients. I think that palliative care provides such a helpful model for dealing with uncertainty because it doesn't discount the value of our knowledge and technology. We use the best science and resources we have to care for our patients at end of life. But the goal isn't to remove uncertainty. The goal is to alleviate the suffering of uncertainty, to help people live, even flourish in the midst of uncertainty. This is important. Psychiatrists, psychologists, chaplains, everyone. This is where we need you. We need you to help teach patients and physicians the skills that you're experts in for alleviating the suffering of uncertainty. So overall, palliating uncertainty is a turn of attention. It's turning attention from the uncertainty to the patient and what we can do to care for them. In practice, it might look like saying, honestly, here's what we don't know, but here's what we can do. And I and my team will be with you through this. A key point in James' philosophy is that how people respond to uncertainty is largely a matter of personality and temperament. Here's the thing I want to point out, though. By and large, the person who's drawn to the field of palliative care tends to be the type who doesn't have any curable urge to fix, who's okay leaving things unresolved, who can sit with the tension of the unknown, and even find joy in being alongside people in their darkest moments. You already are the experts on living with uncertainty. And we know that uncertainty is okay. And we know from our patients that even in uncertainty, life can be lived fully and meaningfully and joyfully. So we can help lead the way in transforming how uncertainty is approached in medicine on the whole. Together, we can palliate uncertainty, alleviating the suffering of it and helping people to live courageously with it. Thank you.